In the heart of Russia's Ural Mountains, there is a place the local Mountsy people call the Mountain of the Dead. It is a name that would prove tragically prophetic. In February 1959, a search party scanning the white expanse from a helicopter spotted something unnatural, a splash of color against the endless white. As they descended, the scene came into horrifying focus. A tent torn open from the inside, and around it, not a single footprint. 9 experienced hikers were on an expedition. Not one survived. The investigation that followed would uncover a scene so bizarre, so inexplicable, that it would become one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of the 20th century. This is the story of the Dyatlov Pass Incident. Led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, the group of 9, 7 men and 2 women, were all students from the Ural Polytechnical Institute. They were not amateurs. These were seasoned trekkers in peak physical condition on a challenging skiing and mountaineering expedition categorized as the most difficult level in the Soviet Union. Their journey began on January 25, 1959. For days, they made steady progress, sending back optimistic postcards. Their final diary entry on February 1st described setting up camp on the slope of the mountain. They were a single day's march from their next supply depot. The weather was turning, but they were prepared. That night, something happened, something that made them panic. When the search team finally reached the tent on February 26th, they found a mystery that defied logic. The tent was still partially standing, but a long vertical gash had been cut from the inside. The hikers' belongings, their warm clothes, their boots, their passports, their money, were all left behind. It was as if they had fled in a state of pure, unadulterated terror. The investigators followed the tracks. 8 or 9 sets of footprints, made by people in socks or even barefoot, led away from the tent and down the slope towards the tree line. The temperature that night was estimated at minus 25 degrees Celsius, or minus 13 Fahrenheit. The first 2 bodies were found under a large cedar tree hay at the edge of the forest. They were barefoot, dressed only in their underwear. The remains of a small fire were nearby. It seemed they had tried and failed to survive the cold. But the mystery was only deepening. Over the following months, as the snow melted, the other 7 bodies were discovered. 3, including the group leader Igor Dyatlov, were found between the tree and the tent, as if they had been trying to crawl back to camp. They had died of hypothermia. The final 4 bodies were found in a ravine, covered by 3 meters of snow, and it was here that the case turned from a tragedy into a nightmare. The last 4 hikers were better dressed than the others, but they had suffered catastrophic injuries that made no sense. 2 of them had massive crushing injuries to their chests. The official report stated the force was comparable to a car crash, yet there wasn't a single broken bone on the outside. Their injuries were entirely internal. Even more bizarrely, one of the victims was missing her tongue. Her eyes were gone, others had fractured skulls, but there were no signs of a struggle, no defensive wounds. And perhaps the strangest clue of all, some of their clothing was found to be highly radioactive. The official inquest was closed in May 1959. The conclusion? The hikers died from a compelling natural force. Case closed. But what natural force causes such specific, violent internal injuries without leaving a mark on the skin? What force could terrify 9 experts into fleeing their tent into almost certain death? For over 60 years, the theories have proliferated, each more chilling than the last. First, the rational explanations. An avalanche is the most popular theory, but the slope was not steep enough for a major slide, and an avalanche would have buried the tent, not prompted them to cut their way out. Another theory is infrasound, low-frequency sound from the wind that could have induced panic and irrational terror, but it doesn't explain the physical injuries. Then there is military testing. The area was off-limits to hikers for 3 years after the incident. Were the Soviets testing a new weapon? A sonic device? This could explain the internal injuries and the radioactivity. Then there are the more bizarre explanations. Could a creature or hostile tribesmen have attacked? But there were no tracks of any other creature and no signs of a physical fight. Others point to UFOs and ball lightning. Some reports mention strange orange spheres in the sky that night. Could ball lightning have entered the tent, causing burns and panic? Could it be responsible for the internal injuries? It remains one of the most plausible yet unproven scientific explanations. The Dyatlov Pass incident remains an open wound in the history of exploration, a puzzle with pieces that refuse to fit. In 2019, Russian authorities reopened the case, only to conclude again in 2020 that it was an avalanche. But for many, that answer is too simple. It doesn't account for the radiation, the missing tongue, or the look of pure terror that must have been on their faces. The 9 hikers went into the mountains seeking adventure. They found something else entirely, something that forced them to flee their only shelter, something that pursued them down a snowy slope, and something that killed them with a force we still cannot name. What do you think happened that night on the Mountain of the Dead? Was it a rare avalanche, a secret weapons test, or something beyond our current understanding? The case is closed, but the mystery is very much alive.